Okay, so last time when we met, we talked about the theory of jobs to be done, the principles, the 4 principles that guides it, and the 3 questions that we should take into consideration when we are thinking about something, an idea of a product or a service or that we want to develop as an augmentation to an already existing product or service that we have, or as a new development, right? So that was the theory of jobs to be done. We also discussed of how we will take an idea for each group and go on working through these 5 sessions that we are going to meet in order to develop an application of what is it that we are learning through, okay? Within the theory of jobs to be done, we learned about how context or circumstances is so important to know that a particular offering can mean something different at different times to different people. That is tied very closely to the concept of segmentation. Those are the key, key terms or key strategies that are used in marketing. And no matter how old it is still one of the most fundamental ideas that any organization, any firm, whether it's B2B or B2C or how big or how small, they need to have that STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning ideas nailed to a T in order to proceed with any kind of a marketing strategy. So if you did get a chance to go through the diffusion of through the elements of value and the jobs to be done article, you would see that they almost all the time go back to the value of understanding your segments really well, because then you can design your product and service in order to cater to those people and know how it can be personally relevant to those people, right? Now, within the elements of value article, how many of you, did you get a chance to read the main article? There is an interview from the authors of the article. The last one is, the B2B, and the HBR, the elements of value article right over here, is where they actually discuss the development of the model and its where it can be used and how it can be used. Anyone had a chance to go over it, can quickly point out the main points for that article, please?
Is this the B2B one?
This is, let me share it. B2B is the extension of B2C, and you can do either one of them, doesn't matter. But I'm talking about this main article, the elements of value.
So it was basically talking about like the elements of like function, emotional and social, and where they're placed, or basically the where they're like how saving time falls under like a functional thing, function. So
yeah, thank you. And the methodology that they have used in order to gather this data is quite robust. If you take a look at it, they have 10,000, they have data from 10,000 customers in terms of their experiences in different categories of industrial categories. In addition to that, then they cross-reference those data through the NPS Net Promoter Score and the actual profitability of these companies. Now, in one of these sessions, I will talk about Net Promoter Score and whether it's really the do-it-all that it has been proposed as, or are there caveats to it, and how can we look at it? But we see that it is a very common KPI these days, isn't it? Every single company is using it as just that one question. Is it me who is echoing?
No, Shomil, can you mute? I think getting a feedback from your line.
Thank you. So, that the dilemma of Net Promoter Score is something that we'll definitely cover, because it's extremely important to know the value proposition that these kind of KPIs bring to the table, and what are we missing if we are only looking at certain specific aspects to it. But nevertheless, it is a very established KPI, and what this research did is to collaborate the findings of the survey through the NPS and the net profitability. And what did they find in terms of the values? Anyone? What were the key findings? They found that many companies that are really successful or has a healthy NPS score had a mixture of these values, right? They had a good spread of these values that consumers very clearly related to. Like, you know how we say what comes to your mind, the very first thing in terms of branding, they are called prototype brands, right? Like when you say search engine, many of us don't even understand the difference between search engine and Google. That's how embedded Google is, right? When we talk about photocopies, Xerox comes to our mind as not a brand, but as the process. That's how strong that is, right? So these kind of brands are prototypes for the companies for the industrial sector that they represent, right? In fact, let's do a very quick exercise to wake you all up in the morning if you've not had your coffee yet, right? What comes to your mind immediately? Okay, you have to tell it to me. Unmute yourself, all of you. I don't care about the chaos. Let's all unmute ourselves and tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say, and it has to be within a couple of seconds. What comes to your mind when I say electric cars?
Tesla.
Tesla.
Ketchup. Ketchup.
Heinz,
Fine.
Fast food.
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Paint.
Benjamin Moore.
Air.
Benjamin Moore.
You give me an industry now. Beer.
Bush. Budweiser.
Michelob.
Ultra.
Schlitz.
Yeah. What else? Now I'm blanking out. But you see, anytime you call out or ask people to name something that comes to your mind for a particular product category, the brands that they remember are the brands that are the prototype of them. They have done such a good job that we as consumers, we associate that brand to be a representation of that industry. And many a times, so much so that it substitutes for the industry itself. That brand has become a verb, a noun, right? At one point, Kodak did that too, and it's coming back with different options, but we'll see. So that is what these kind of research re-emphasize again and again and again. This is not a new concept. This is something that has existed, but refinement of these concepts, especially because of the changes that are happening outside in the economy, the consumer power that we have now in co-production, in terms of co-creation, that has changed the values and the outlook. The other economical, technological, social, political values that has progressed and changed during the times that has passed changes these values. So these researchers just take the current context or circumstances, as we say in the theory of jobs to be done, and re-emphasize what is important. And therefore, these kind of researchers or these kind of results or ideas are often seen surfacing the literature every decade or so, because there is substantial changes happening every decade or so for the companies, right? And because of the technological advancement, because of the social advancements, globalization, and so on. So this research found that very well-established companies do offer core values to its customers, which is very easy for the customers to relate to. And the more stronger these mix of values were, the more prominent the profitability of these companies were, and the higher the NPS scores for these organizations were. So from a causal versus correlation point of view, they did find this to have some impact on the end results or the bottom line of the organizations, right? So that's why from a theory of jobs to be done, this article substantiates what might be good what might be some of the criteria that we can look into when we are thinking about an idea, when we are thinking about an augmentation that would help our firm. Okay, and how can we clearly build that and communicate that to our consumers? Now, when I teach branding and I start with these kind of theories, I always have to remind my students that brands are not made all of a sudden. You have to go back to the very beginning. You have to go back to the idea or the core elements of a product or service in order to understand how the branding element will be built for that product or service. Because the branding is an extension. It's the face value, if you may, of your offering. So if you don't understand the crux of your offering, it is very difficult for you to understand how the components of branding would play into it. Okay? All right. So then the article goes ahead and talks about, it gives you examples of how companies have done well using these values. The end of the article also gives you some industries and what were the most prominent values that the consumer identified within these industries right here. Do you all see the article on the screen? Am I sharing it? Okay. So these are the industries. But before that, they actually share the process, the 4-step process of how a company and an organization can understand what kind of values do their proposition hold, and how to, correlate it or synthesize with the consumer's perception of these values, whether it's important for the consumers or not. So staying away from the myopic view and getting more integrated to the customer-centric view, they list these 4 different stages, right? Structured listening, ideation sessions, customer-centric design of prototype, and then the choice modeling, which is data-driven, of course. So these were the 4 steps that they talked about in order to understand how to value things. Now, if you go back to the main module or the homepage of the Canvas website for the course, you will see 2 words. Let me show you. You will see towards the middle somewhere. Yeah, the project documentation is already uploaded in there. I will come and talk about it in just a second. And towards the end, I just keep uploading some of the articles that I find interesting and I come across on a daily basis. And these are really short articles, 5 to 9 pages. But I do like them. Most of them are related to an in-depth research study that was carried on. So this is, again, something that I encourage you to go over during your free time. We will talk about some of these concepts during our conversations, because these are all related to the topic that we are covering and are as recent as can be. Like I said at the beginning of this class, because the marketing area in general has changed so much, and with the pandemic and going on, and now we are trying to go back to some normalcy. It's going to be different than what normal was before, but the trend that's going on, there's a lot that's changing and is here to stay. So I try to keep posting things that might be interesting to me and relevant to me over here. Okay. Now going back to the main, the final project, let me share that very quickly. The first part of the final project that you'll be working on talks about the theory of jobs to be done and the value creation, right? So last time when we met, we talked about this, the business idea, that I asked you to come up with a business idea. As you work for it, you will see that you will get more clarity about the constraints, the assumptions that surrounds your business idea. So these sessions of your final project are things that will keep changing and evolving as you work through it. But I'm asking you to look at the 3 different contexts of theory of jobs to be done and apply that to see how is that idea relevant to the current market, okay? In addition to that, here is the elements of value, and this is what we will discuss today. That is, how are you going to understand what kinds of value will your product or service or idea offer to your main customer segments, all right? And so some data collection procedures before the product or service actually hits the market that can help you refine your idea is the second part. And we will combine this with, so the third part of diffusion of innovation in S-curve, or the market analysis, is going parallel as we are collecting this data of understanding the values. Okay, so by the end of the session today, we should have covered the diffusion of innovation and the segmentation part as well. All right.
Here's your reminder.
So
join Miss McLean's gas.
Alexa, stop. Thank you. So that is what we are going to discuss today. All right. So do you want a couple of seconds to just go over the elements of value, just to scan over it? Or are you comfortable with me diving into the data part or the diffusion part? All good, all good? Okay, and we'll be covering this as we go on. We'll be discussing this, so don't worry about it if you hadn't had a chance, that's fine. All right, so by now we know that we need to get some customer information before we actually set the idea into the market. And this, for all of you working in the corporate world, you know that that's exactly how it happens. There's never a time where a product or a service or an idea is developed and pushed onto the market. There's always research that goes behind it. So based on the ways that people have changed, what are some of the methods that we do carry on in terms of data collection that are different than those that just focuses on qualitative or quantitative data? Okay, if we do that, let me go ahead. There we go. So before the product actually gets into the market, going back to the theory of jobs to be done, where we want to see if there are areas of non-consumption, or there are workarounds, or there are areas that consumers want to avoid, or they're using the existing products in order to accomplish something different than what it was intended for. If we are trying to understand if there is a gap that exists amongst any of these criteria to develop our new idea or our new product or service, then we need to understand the market. Now, many a times for startups or smaller companies, we don't usually have the fund to run the big gamut of market research. So the way that consumers talk these days, or the way they behave these days, what are some of the common methods that are being used? Can you think about it? From your work experience, I know that all of you know the various methods of data collection, right? Can you talk about any innovative experience that you have had for any project in terms of collecting data from the end users, whether it is a B2B scenario or a B2C scenario? And I can't necessarily see everybody on my screen, so if you would please identify yourself when you speak, that would be great.
Professor, it's Adam. I'm not sure I'd coin it as innovative because it's done all the time, but we use focus groups to evaluate certain things, new games, new equipment, things like that. And we do it with both retailers and consumers.
Yeah, focus group is one of the most established forms of data collection, qualitative data collection, right? Anyone else?
Hi, Professor. We use a lot of polls in WhatsApp groups that we're a part of that already have our existing client base, and we're a part of it as well. So we'll post polls if we're pivoting to different financial products within our real estate firm.
Yes, the change in the format of data collection. Thank you. One more example, please. Okay, no problem. So some of the most established form, if you pick up any kind of marketing research textbook, you will see that the most common formats of qualitative and quantitative data ranges from in-depth interview, observations, focus group, surveys, polls, and now big data, right? So these are the most common ones, but sometimes when you're collecting, to some extent, web data do capture your honest behavior. But what it tells, what is the main caveat of big data? Can anyone think about it? Have you all seen the behind the data collection of a Google Web Analytics? So if I have Web Analytics embedded within my website, Google Web Analytics embedded within my website, what is the end result that we get? You all have seen that, right? Yes or no? Let me see. I'm gonna try and see everybody on screen. Give me a shout out. Yes or no? Everybody has seen it. The whole gamut of matrices that is collected through Google Analytics.
Yes.
Right. And it's really interesting. It's overwhelming and interesting, isn't it? But if I were to ask you, what is the one main disadvantage of that data? I can think of many advantages, but what is the one main drawback of web big data?
Home iPad or home iPad?
Would it be that it's like anonymous, that you can't necessarily trace a person and the attributes of that person to what you're collecting?
That would be, but Adam, most of the time quantitative data are anonymous, and in addition to that, Google Analytics, some would argue that it violates the confidentiality to a great extent, because they actually have your affinity group, market group, or interests, and even the demographic data that is collected. If you have a Google registration account, it's like they know more about me than I know about myself. So yes, they do, but they probably don't publish my name, but it's not anonymous. That is the whole reason or the premise around these privacy issues that they are fighting again over these days, right? So what else? And competition is, yes, it can be available to the competition, but in the old days, I remember when I used to work for Marico, and it's a consumer goods company. At that, I am dating myself, but at that time, they used to have dumpster diving or mole. We used to send our people from our organization into the competition just to find out what they're doing. So we have always found, companies have always found, I don't agree with it. It's unethical. Don't quote me on that. But the companies have always found ways to get information from the competition. But let's talk about the data itself. The data that you get.
I think that this is Venu.
Yes.
I think validating the data, or sometimes it's such irrelevant data. There is a lot of noise with it. So I think just to be able to discern the entire data is a big challenge.
Right? That is the big challenge, because all we get is the what they did. It's the outcome that we are seeing. And how many of us browse all over the internet with no intended outcome or goal, right? We are just browsing. But if we are clicking on something, the way that this data is interpreted by most of the managers is interest. There is no interest, right? So the difference between what and why, and that is how we see, if you really look at it, and especially after post-pandemic, well, we're not on the other side of the tunnel yet, but because we have 1 year worth of data now, you'll see a lot of articles from very reputable sources claiming that, the digital advertisements or these KPIs of paid per cost per click and all those are not as effective. There are a lot of companies that are realizing. There was just another research that was published in Wall Street Journal 2 days ago that said, ad overload has a more negative impact on consumers' choices than having inappropriate content in the ad itself, right? So that's the main caveat of these big data, that the whats are what is being captured, and there is no evidence that it's about the reasoning or why of the data. The exact same difference of the correlation and causation. These are all correlational data. We don't know why they are doing that. And many a times we are strategizing based on these outcomes that really do not have a well-found basis to them, right? So that's why it's whenever you see in quantitative analysis specifically, when you're looking at the data, always understand the constraints and assumptions of that data when you are making any recommendation. For example, if the entire data set has 80% representation of age groups 18 to 24, and you're saying people using this product across the line, that's an invalid data analysis, right? You always have to go back to your sample and understand who is that data pertaining to. And therefore the results of those analyses would also only pertain to the people who have actually filled out the data. But very rarely, very, very rarely do we see these kind of deductions being made with that knowledge at the back of our mind, right? So knowing that we have a lot of data is great. Excuse me, but also understand the shortcomings or the disadvantages that might come along with that turf. Okay, so what are some of the different ways that we can capture data other than these traditional, very well-found bases? Okay, some of the ways that some interesting case studies have used are, say, for example, this is a study that was published, a small startup firm that wanted to, create a niche for fast food market in terms of healthy on-the-go breakfast, because breakfast, like we all say, like we all know, is the most profitable segment of fast food market, right? So what they did is they recruited about 30 individuals of the age groups that they wanted to cater to, and they asked them to just take selfies during the morning from 8 a.m. or I forget, so 7 a.m. maybe, from the morning, the time they wake up till 11, that is the breakfast window that most people use, and just take selfies of whatever it is that they were eating and explain in a couple of sentences why they chose that product and how did they feel about it, okay? So they wanted to see what healthy food is. So for the first 15 days, they just kept sending them diaries of what kind of food they ate. From those 15 days of data, and imagine some people say that a group of 30 individuals and 15 days is really not enough in order to build any strategy. But think about it. If 15 days and 30 people, if each person is eating or drinking at least 3 food per day, then the data points that you're getting is way more than just that, right? It's 30 times 3 times 15. So you think about it in those terms. And what they found out was that people had these perceptions of certain food items that they believed to be healthy or nutritious. And they say, for example, Snickers came up as one of the healthy food that they ate on a go, just because it has a tiny little layer of peanut in between caramel and chocolate that was, that people thought was a healthy choice that they made, or just because they had, cheese sandwich filled in but a wheat wrap, the part wheat made it healthy no matter how much sauce they put into it or what went into it, or it was bacon laden or whatever. So it's siloed. What they saw was consumers' perception of what healthy was way different than what healthy would originally mean, like truly mean. So it was very interesting for them to see what to a consumer was healthy and what did on the go mean for them, right? So these were the main value propositions that they wanted to offer to the consumers. They wanted to offer on the go healthy breakfast that you can just grab and go, and you don't have to worry about sitting and eating it at a particular place. So what they saw was that, specifically pointing out ingredients was very important to convince consumers that it is a healthy food. So they needed to know that was very important for them, that it's green, or it's, it has calories are not something. Oh, another thing, I jump around it. They knew that calories were not something, even if the information of calories were given to the consumers, that is not something that we average consumers understand in terms of how many calories is good for you, what this calorie intake would mean for the whole day of consumption of food that you make. And so while a lot of companies are spending a lot of time in using these kind of data dumps on their menu, consumers don't relate to it as much, but they do relate to whole grains or wheat or greens or fresh fruit or non-processed food as healthy. So their positioning changed from using data and telling them how many calories and how many grams of this, that, and what was in that particular breakfast, and expressed more interest in telling them more about the ingredients. Where did they buy it from? Whether it had any, but not just labels that FDA has approved, but like non-GMO. If you go into my undergraduate class and ask them what non-GMO means, none of them know what it actually means. They just know that it is probably something that's good. So that doesn't matter. But if you really tell them that this is, locally grown, or has not been treated by pesticides ever, or natural fertilizers were used, those are the things that were easy for consumers to decipher and relate back to the concept of what healthy means, right? And then the other area that they researched about was what does on the go mean, right? And this is where Christensen's very famous example of milkshakes for the morning breakfast also came into play. What does on the go mean? On the go is not just the capability of transportation or the capability of holding something and being on a run, but we are doing a lot of things while we are on our morning commute. So how does it help leave my fingers unsmudged or not greasy? How does it help me? The viscosity of it is not spilled, or all of that. So the concept, the holistic concept of what does this mean? So they knew that their competitive advantage, or the main value that they wanted to go for, is healthy and on-the-go breakfast. So what does these two concepts mean to the consumers was very important for them to create that offering for them, right? And then they did an interesting method of actually capturing this data. Now, what is the advantage of this data as compared to an open survey or polls, say, for example? How would you create a poll if you wanted to know what does healthy and on-the-go food options mean to the consumers?
But this way, it's unconstrained. You're not limiting their choices.
If you're creating a poll, you are creating your own perception, right? You will give them options. So you're already building a box for them. If you're creating a survey, you are creating the questions, right? you're already telling them to think what you want them to think. Perceptual vigilance, you know about that, right? TFK, thinking fast, thinking slow. You see what you want to see, you hear what you want to hear, right? If you're thinking about buying a particular brand of car and you go out on the road, all of a sudden, don't you see a lot of those cars, which were just not obvious to you yesterday? Because it's perceptual vigilance. Your mind is in sync with what it wants to see, right?
Oh
So
my
when
God,
you're
that's so true.
So that's perceptual vigilance. The same thing happens in data collection when and remember marketing myopia. When you're thinking about the product that you're creating, it is a very strong urge within us managers to try to qualify that thought, right? So when you're asking survey questions or polls, you are very likely to include the survey questions or poll options that you want to validate for your own sake, rather than listen to what the actual consumers have to say about it. So when you collect data from an open-ended sources like these, it gives you a more realistic perception of what the consumers have to say. Think about it. If you're creating a question of what is healthy food, wouldn't you include options like USDA approved, right? Organic, GMO, all those things, right? Or calorie intake? You're forcing the consumers to think about it. But if you create an open-ended data collection like the example that this case study talks about, then you're not giving them any limitations. And then you really come to know what they believe or what they perceive as a common language healthy food. Not that USDA GMO or organic or calorie intake is not good. Those are valuable information and can easily be done because it's procedure. But knowing what kind of product attributes actually convey the message that you really want to convey is something you would miss through a survey and a poll data. Agree, disagree?
Is it okay to open it with an open-ended answer so they can put in what they think and then later on put something that put the things that you want, the keywords that you want, and then they can select that?
That's a very good question, John. Can you give me an example of what that open-ended question would look like? Take the same example, the same context that we are talking about. What would you ask them?
Well, just like what you were mentioning, what do you think, what is healthy? What are some keywords that you would look for if you're looking for a healthy selection?
Awesome. Now answer my question. And this is to the whole class. If someone comes to you and asks that question, what does healthy mean to you? Or what are some of the keywords that would relate to your healthy food? Most of us, in order, we are going to talk about it in just the next few seconds. This is called thematic apperception. All of us want us to be perceived as really knowledgeable, really smart. How many of you have been to a doctor's office and then they ask, do you exercise? And the fact that you took the stairs, you say that, yes, you do exercise. Although we never have stepped on a treadmill in the last 20 days, don't we? Don't we, right? So when you ask them to think about keywords that relates to healthy, we want to sound smart, no matter how many times we researchers tell them that it's anonymous, we are not judging you, this, that, and the other. We always put ourselves in that chair, and we use the words like USDA, we use the word like organic, we use that's human behavior, right? But when you tell them, just take a photo and tell me what you think about it. Do you think it's an unhealthy option? What about it attracted you? Then it creates a lens. It's called the principles of projection. When people think that they're not being judged, but they're describing a context, they forgive those biases, inbuilt inherent biases that we have as human beings, and then they give you unbiased answers. Now, analysis of this data is way more difficult than running a correlation or a regression analysis on quantitative data. It's time consuming. The data collection procedure is time consuming. But it really gives you a very uninhibited and a true sense of what consumers understand. Would you agree or not?
I agree.
Right? And again, I'm saying I am a statistician by training, and I churn data. So I'm not saying that that's not good, but I'm just saying that for any method, even in this, the main disadvantage of this method is that I am basing my data on a very small sample size of 30 people, and they might have a really strong idiosyncratic variable that misses the whole population that I want to cater to. So the limited sample size that is inherent in these kind of design is a big caveat that the quantitative data don't have. But for each one of them, there can be not a happy, but an optimal middle where you can understand what part of which data can actually give you good, valuable information, right? So nothing is I'm not proposing that this is the better way, but this is an alternative way of looking at a particular data point where you get more of why, not just what. Does that make sense? Right? Good questions. Any other questions before we proceed?
Can you tell me what the acronym TFK stands for again?
Oh, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a book by Kahneman and Tversky. It's a really good book in behavioral economics. It talks about how our mind works, thinking fast and thinking slow. It tells that there are two conscious and unconscious sides of our brain, and how the data transfers between conscious and unconscious mind, and we play and we make our decisions and behave in certain way. I strongly encourage you all to read it. It's an amazing book, based on these theories. Dan Orley, his first book, Predictably Irrational, he wrote many books after that, but I think most of it is a repetition. But his first book, Predictably Irrational, I'm telling you, you won't be able to keep that book down once you start reading it. It is amazing. And these are all experimental data that tells us, how people behave and what is the value. Anybody in sales and persuasion should read Predictably Irrational. The power of free agents, the anchoring, the concept of anchoring. We'll cover a bit of it. Let me see if I can leave out something that you can get from a textbook, or you might already have from your experience, and talk about these concepts of nudge. And nudge is the most recent one. I'm sure you've read about it too. But that is, again, in all honesty, I found Thinking Fast and Slow and Predictably Irrational to be a more engaging book as compared to Nudge. If you read those two books, you'll see that, again, it's a different frame of the very same concepts, but it's good. The more expansions we get through these books, the better. But these are amazing books in my point of view. Hold on. I have a message that I need to read from you all. Any other book suggestions? I will share my books suggestions. There is one, who is that researcher? The researcher at Arizona State University that does persuasion. I will share a list of books.
There's that book, Persuasion, also. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Who wrote that book, Adam? Tell me the name, please.
Persuasion, let me see.
It's on my tongue. It's, again, a very good book, the Psychology of Sales and Persuasion.
The Black Book of Persuasion?
Yeah. Who wrote that book, Shamil?
Is his name Cialdini or something like that?
Cialdini, there you go. Robert Cialdini, again, at Arizona State University. He does some amazing work too in terms of persuasion and sales, but these are good books. They all talk about these kind of methods, when you really need to get to the crux of why people behave the way they do. You can't ask them direct questions, because then that inherent human bias always comes in, because we always feel that we're being judged. And so we always taint our answer no matter what. And we convince ourselves, you know, when I sit across the doctor and say that I eat healthy because for breakfast I eat fruit, and no matter what I eat for lunch or dinner doesn't matter. I, as a human being, I'm convincing myself that I do have healthy eating habits. You know, that's the inherent bias. So these are amazing books. Okay, where were we? So the types of data collection, how can you understand, you know, non-consumption or workarounds or things that people want to avoid? And how can you see that your idea of your product or service is actually catering to these? So if you want to understand whether that gap actually exists, you need some kind of a reassurance from consumer data, right? So these are the methods of collecting those data. And then going forward with what we already discussed, this is the principle of projection that I was just talking to you about. And here we say that, you know, if you give somebody a non-personal or ambiguous situation and you ask them to elaborate on it or build a structure around it or expand it, then they're more likely to give you an honest picture, because that takes care of, or that you know, bypasses the inbuilt censoring mechanisms that we have within ourselves. So it is a much, in terms of validity of the data, this kind of data has a high validity of actual behavior as compared to the quantitative data that we collect, right? Now, in terms of behavior and attitude, again, an amazing work of research has shown that that the data of anticipated behavior that can be collected through surveys or quantitative data is vastly different. Like I think the significance level was 0.09, which is way more than the acceptable lenient range of 0.05. People often just believe that they're going to act in a certain way if you ask them of a context, but they don't. So, you know, there is a big caveat of collecting quantitative data and believing that it's actually going to translate into that same behavior when you hit the market with that analysis, okay? So these kind of techniques are built in order to help you understand this. And this is not something new. This has always been going on. Behavioral economics have become a highlight in the last decade or so, a bit more than that. But this has always been there, you know? Think about the Mason-Hire technique. Anyone remembers? This was in 60s, the MIT Mason-Hire technique. Anyone aware of it? So long time ago, when instant coffee hit the market, the sales for the instant coffee, you know, they did the general marketing research that's required to do in order to understand the predicted sales. And the blind taste tests always suggested that that there was no significant difference between drip coffee and instant coffee, and people liked it. The instant coffee was also available at a lower price. And so they believed that, you know, this is a product that is going to hit the shelves and do really well. Now, what happened when they actually rolled out that product, it didn't do as well as expected, right? Maxwell was the firm that first rolled out the instant coffee. Now I'm talking about 1950s. So at that time, Mason-Hire was, again, a researcher at MIT consulting on this particular project. And so they were confused in terms of what went wrong. You know, the product was high quality, the blind taste tests, if I can ever pronounce it, suggested that the product actually tastes good. It was at a lower price. They had the right shelf space in the retail market, but it still wasn't doing well. They had the ad campaigns to tell consumers or make them aware of it, but it didn't work. So what was going on? So what Mason-Hire did, it said that, you know, he did this experiment where he actually created two different shopping list A and shopping list B. All the items that were included on shopping list A and shopping list B were identical, except for one of the shopping lists had the regular drip coffee, and the other one had instant coffee, okay? And they recruited a group of people, randomly gave them shopping list A versus shopping list B, and they were asked to describe, and remember, you have to go back to the context. I'm talking about 1950s, okay? And they were all asked to elaborate on, who do you think, can you describe the woman who is going to go out and shop for these items using shopping list A versus shopping list B? Any guesses? Any guess of what these descriptions might have looked like? Remember 1950s, okay? See, again, I'm doing perceptual vigilance. I need to remind myself, so I'm imposing my thoughts on you that it is 1950s. Both the shopping lists were identical. All the product categories were the same. The only difference was that one had drip coffee and the other had instant coffee.
Well, my initial thought is that people would perceive that it was more of a family woman, married woman with children, a husband who used the drip coffee, stay at home type person, as opposed to the instant coffee, maybe more single, maybe more, on the go, so to say.
Working women.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But
All
could
right.
it be tied up more in the perception that if you're not taking the time to make the drip coffee, that you're not taking care of your family as well because you're using instant coffee?
Yeah, but
Bang
you're
on.
lazy or something.
Bang on, bang on. That is exactly what happened, Again, 1950, remember, but people who saw the list with instant coffee described, and again, they were asked about women, because at that point, that was the primary job. They were lazier, less organized, spendthrift, and not a good wife. I always get really, but I have to calm myself down. So this is how they described the women who would shop for instant coffee, right? Now, in no survey, in no taste test, in no interview would they have ever agreed to something like this when they were asked direct questions like, what is the taste? Because they're not thinking about anything else. They're just thinking about the taste. And they would tell you how it tastes. How is the price point? They're not thinking about the context. Remember, jobs to be done, circumstances, context is very, very, very important. What do you see here? There is not even a single functional element included in there. It's all emotional and social, right? You're less organized, you're lazier, you're spendthrift. And when we as managers think about our product and service, we're focused on attributes, 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 function, function. Function is important. Your product can do nothing if it is not sound on a functional component, but that's not where it ends. That is the starting point. You have a chance to live in the market only if your functional components are sound. But what happens after that is what would give you the profitability, right? So if you were the manager and you now know this piece of information, what would you do?
Address that misconception or the conception that you found.
Good. How? What would you do?
Well, you could say that you're saving time on making coffee so you can do other like amazing things with your kids or family or something like that.
Yeah.
Your husband works hard for his money. Try and save him some money by buying the instant coffee.
And Kara and Adam, that's exactly what they did. The initial promotion of that product was how you're getting the same taste for lower price, right? And that it's quick to make, but they changed it to exact same illustrations of where they were talking about, now you have time to do more. Imagine that, it still makes me angry, but now you can serve more.
And before anyone reports me to Lisa Kaplowitz, I was putting myself in the 1950s mindset.
Yeah, you have to when you're doing, and that's the beauty of case studies. I always, even at executive MBA level, when I'm doing case studies, I always have to remind them, you have to put yourself in the shoes of what's happening and when it's happening. Only then you'll be able to understand why those reasonings. The moment you put your logical head on, the case is invaluable, because then you're thinking of things that did not exist at that point in time or wasn't in the context at that point in time. And then your analysis doesn't matter, right? So, so yes, truly. And this got famous as the Mason hire technique. Now, the reason why it's not very popular is because it's really difficult to do. Not that it's not, it does not give you results that you want to, but it is a difficult process to identify, right? A lot of companies do easier versions of these projection techniques in order to collect data. They use things like word association, right? What comes to your mind the moment you hear this, that, and the other thing. And these word association techniques gives you attitudes, gives you positive associations, negative associations, and so on. The same thing goes with sentence completion. You remember a few years ago when a lot of car dealers were trying to have more and more female car salespeople on the floor. This was very common. There was a big case study that was done, and they used sentence completion. Why there was this lack of trust among male consumers that female car salespeople were actually knowledgeable about the cars, right? So they did this sentence completion in terms of knowing what were those inhibitions, what were those pain points, what were those obstacles, right? Even in the project that you're going to do, when you talk about your business idea, I tell you to think about constraints and assumptions. And then the second part tells you, what are the main pain points? What do you think you'll have to really fight to overcome in order for consumers to see your product as being valuable, or product or idea or service to be valuable to them, right? So these techniques, like quick, when they don't have time to think about it, when they have to react immediately, these kind of techniques help them give you more accurate answers. Okay, now I need to wake you up all again. So I'm going to show you something in the next slide. Everybody ready? And you're going to tell me the first thing that comes to the mind when you see that. I don't mind the chaos. Unmute yourself and we'll go for a chaotic run now. Ready? I hope that's the next slide. So if it's not, hold for the anticlimax. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Aruba.
Beach.
Somebody is planning on
Islands.
Relax.
Serenity.
Corona.
Vacation.
Tropical.
One Earth.
Hawaii.
Go on. Come on, we are 18 of us.
Unreal.
Luxury.
Right? I heard Corona. I
Yeah.
heard vacation. What
No
is that?
kids.
Amen to that. So think about the kind of things that came to your mind. This is just this is a photograph of beach, of a beautiful beach, but we have product categories and ideas that we relate to it. And what's most interesting to me is vacation time or a specific place are obvious things, or travel agencies are obvious things, but there has never been a single session of the many sessions that I've had where somebody did not say Corona, right? That's the association that people have. Now it's a beer, and we are thinking about jobs to be done. We are thinking about how we create a niche in terms of how can you be different, or what purpose it is that you're fulfilling. Then when all the other beer brands are talking about camaraderie or friendship or having a good time, Corona has always consistently, associated itself with relaxing time on a beach. And so now that association is so strong that you have that information in your mind to associate with it, right? That is brand connection. That is how strong the brand connection builds. Now, going back to the Snicker example of how it came out to be a healthy on-the-go breakfast, do you remember the ad campaign for Snickers? You're not you when you're hungry? Remember?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. You know what? Give me a minute. Let me share one of the ads. I don't have it open, so it's going to take just a couple of seconds, but bear with me, will you please? Hold on. And someone has to remind me when we have break. I never remember it.
The name.
Senthil, I'll need your help now. I'm almost pretty sure about it. Because the video will have to, the voice I always forget. It's just one step. I always forget it.
Yeah, when you share screen, there'll be a checkbox to share audio while sharing video.
So new share in this and share. And what do I do when I share screen?
There should be a checkbox.
Share sound.
Yes.
That one? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me if you see it, if you hear it.
We can.
Mike, come on! Mike, what is your deal, man?
Come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby! Eat a Snickers. Better?
Better. Hey! I'm all bad!
That hurt. You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
So when Snickers actually rolled out this ad campaign, and they had many versions of that. Do you remember? Many different versions of this particular. Okay, sorry. So they had many different versions, and it's an interesting. Sometimes I see myself almost, drained into it when I'm seeing it. What they saw was that actually the use of Snicker as a midday snack or a substitute for lunch really went up high, because this is where the candy bar was a very common product, was now positioned as a substitute for food when you're hungry, not just enjoyment or not just as a treat that the hundreds of other candy bars that are available in the market was positioned as and used as a celebration, as a treat, as something that's special, right? This was positioned for the first time as a substitute for food when you're hungry. And in many subsequent research from there on, they saw that consumers, one, it has peanut in it, the strong association of peanut and protein, and this combination of how they use this as a food really triggered that space which was missing. So talk about non-consumption. You can never think of candy in a non-consumption space, but it really sneaked into a non-consumption space through this positioning. There's nothing different in that product, but they did it through positioning, right? We're going to learn about brand positioning in our next session, but so it is. So that is association, brand association of what it is that you want your product to be associated with. So Corona over here. All right, what comes to your mind? Ready again? What comes to your mind?
De Beers.
Beers.
The Diamond, isn't that the Diamond Company?
Yeah.
Wedding engagement.
Uh-huh.
Sandals Resorts.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. I couldn't think of the name of it, but yeah.
Right? Two of the answers that often come up in most of my classes that I find really funny. is one, somebody says any kind of jewelry brand and the beginning of the end, or the beginning of the misery. And the second one is Viagra or Cialis all the time. But again, product association, right? What comes to your mind when you see this?
Vodka.
Oh, thank you. Others.
I think refreshing, like, yeah.
Now let me be specific. What brands come to your mind when you think of this, when you see this?
Any kind of gin.
I was thinking Sprite.
Sprite, yeah. I would go more with tequila, vodka, gin, but just because that's all that I can think of now. But I get your point, right? Anything that's refreshing, anything refreshing, because it has that connotation. So what is thematic apperception? When you're thinking about building brand elements, like your logo, like your copy, what would be the basis of it? You have to understand what it is that you're going to convince your consumers that your product is. And that theme needs to be replicated in whatever brand element you're going to use to communicate that, right? You know about the brand personality, whether it is something rugged you want to let them know about, or whether it's sincere, whether it has an element of strong functionality or truthfulness or honest, the 5 brand personality elements. We'll cover all of them. But that is thematic apperception. These are the things that that companies do on a regular basis, either to refresh their image of the brand that they have, or to understand how to create that image. That an image, when I say image, that is branding. You know, how would you communicate what it is that your product or service is going to offer to the consumers? Okay, so these are some of the very common forms of collecting data. Now, social listening is something that they also talk about in the Elements of Value article. And social listening is very important these days and can be done in many different ways. I'm going to skip a couple of slides, but I'll come back to it. Hold on, I'm going to skip really. Ugh. Anyways, what is social listening? You know, most of the brands have a social media presence now. Yeah. So if you're thinking about a product or category that is either a substitute or an augmented offering of a brand solution that already exists, one of the other methods of collecting data before you'll get into the market is to do social listening through the internet, right? My undergraduate students are getting placed all over the map for a job that actually just entails social listening for 2 purposes. 1, to keep their brand alive and interesting to its consumers, and 2, to get information about S-curves. Now, what are S-curves? Anyone going back to the economics class that you might have taken in your college days? What are S-curves? The innovation S-curves, remember? Okay, no worries. We'll talk about that. Let's understand, why do we need to do all of this? Why do we need to listen to our consumers in order to offer them something that is valuable to them? Okay, in order to do that, I'm again going to take you back to a very fundamental theory that was offered a long time ago in 1960s. And now we see that surfacing back again, because it's called the theory of diffusion of innovation, Rutgers, right? And the characteristics of an innovation. And the main seminal theory of innovation. Now, the reason that it's resurfacing big time is that the theory of diffusion of innovation was written around technical products. So when it started, it actually gained ground when computers started becoming a thing that people were using for businesses. And then there was this economy during 80s and 90s where experiential values were really high. And so it was only used for those technical products. But now with smartphones and internet, the way that any particular product is offered, technology is a component to it, right? Whether it's an app or it's a technology itself, or you're offering something that has a technical component to it. But technology is not isolated anymore. It's integrated in any and almost all offering that we have. So the theory of diffusion of innovation is gaining big grounds back again into our research to just remind people that, hey, this has been done and people still behave like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this theory of diffusion of innovation is and why it will inform us about the kind of data that we need to collect in order to solidify our brand offering. Okay. So the diffusion of innovation suggested that any new idea. Now, when I say innovation, innovation does not always have to be a completely new product, right? An innovation can be an existing product in a new market. An innovation could be an augmentation or a substantial improvement on an existing product, or it could be a completely new product. If you talk about innovation, you would see that they are incremental innovation and different dynamic innovations and different types of innovations, but that's not the scope of this class. So just understand the basic meaning of it, right? It says that any new idea diffuses into the market through these 5 consumer groups, okay? And they say that the first group of people who would use your idea or who would adopt your idea are people who are really invested in your the industry of your product idea or services. They are the enthusiasts, talking in our language now, talking in the new language of marketing. These are the influencers. These are the opinion leaders who believe that they have knowledge about the product category or the service category that you're offering. And therefore you need to get them or have their positive side, because they are the people who would diffuse your innovation into the bigger mass more than, and in today's world, because of consumers' co-power and co-creation, we as consumers, we listen to real people or word of mouth or reviews way more than any advertising, right? We always have real data at hand to validate our concerns. And so these influencers, these opinion leaders, they are categorized as innovators. These are people who are very knowledgeable about your product or service area and have a big following that can diffuse your idea into the mass, okay? But if you look at the normal bell curve over here, you will see that this is a really small percentage of the market if you're talking about. So if you are in this stage, forget about profitability, you're not profitable, but this is an essential, a crucial stage to enter the market. Okay, this is a very small market segment, but a very important market segment. If these people give a green thumb or a green light to your product or service, it is possible that your product or service would go to the next phase of people who are the small little 16.4% of the total market, who are called early adopters. Okay. These are people who are less risk. These are people who are risk takers. They are not financially bound. And so they value the opinion of the innovators or the influencers or the opinion leaders and would give it a try. Okay, so this is the phase of beta testing. And if it gets into the early adopters, this is the stage of understanding your price point. Okay. So because they are not very conscious of pricing, they tend to get products at even a higher price. But if they don't feel that the product is value for the price that they paid for it, they will reject that product. Okay. So the attributes of the product gets really tested by the innovators of how good are the functional values of your products. But the pricing component gets really tested at this stage by your early adopters. Now, even with these, this is 3.4% of the market, roughly speaking, as per the theory. This is 16.4% of the market, roughly speaking, as per the theory. But between these two groups of adopters, you're still not making profit. You're still at a break-even point, okay? But the theory suggests, and it's not a myth, based on thousands of research studies that have collected and validated data, But if you're able to cross this hump, or chasm as they say, and you get to the early majority, these are people who are buying your product at the full price because they're convinced that you're really offering them something that is valuable to them. Then you have a chance of making a profit. Okay, so do you see this curve starting from innovators and technology enthusiasts to early adopters with price adjustments getting into the with price and attribute? Here is attribute adjustment, here is price adjustments, and now you get into the early majority where people are buying your product at the full price because they truly believe in your offering. Okay, this phase over here, from here till here, before it starts to plateau into late majority, this is where you gain maximum profitability. Okay, now you also gain profitability over here when your product is now on sales, or next version of your product, either your competition has come into the market with that, or you have come into the market with the next product. Hold on, let me make my cursor a bit more. My kids teach me these now. So up here, you're still making profit up over here because now the economies of scale come into picture. Your production process comes into picture. You're still even with sales, you are selling the product not at break-even point, but at profit. But you need to get these early majority in your market sales in order to make any profit. So before it starts to plateau down, this curve in economics is called the S curve, right? So all the firms in banking, the products have a 3-year life cycle. Anything that comes up, you're always thinking about what changes it needs or where it's going to go in 3 years. And the moment a new product is rolled out, the team is already thinking about how you will improve it or what would be the next version. The same thing with technology, you know, follow the curve of the different versions that has come out from your various companies, and you will see that they always follow a minimum, a 3-year gap, some lower than that, some more than that, but you have to give some consumers something new because the competition will catch up. It's really easy. The barriers of entry to the market going to the Potter's 5 forces has gone really low because of the way that people can reach its consumers at this point in time. So in order to get to this early majority, to get to a profitable area, they say that consumers always evaluate any kind of technology based on 5 different kinds of characteristics. Okay, that is relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, triability, and observability. Now, what are these? What are these characteristics of any new idea or service that they are building? When you're creating your own brand, you need to know how is it that you're going to communicate these 5 things. Let's discuss what they are. What is relative advantage? By definition, relative advantage is how are you better than whatever is already available in the market. In layman's term, you can look at the actual definition. All the articles that are oh my God, all the articles for these concepts are posted on the module. You can always go back and refer to them for more details. But in layman terms, relative advantage is how are you better. Now, for a very long time, we only thought about it from an economic benefit, so from a pricing benefit, and pricing still is important. There is no 2 ways about it. But pricing is not the only thing now because competition is also a given at today's age. The barriers of entry are so low that anybody can replicate an app, anybody can replicate a service. If it's a matter of resources and time, that something similar to a new product or service enters the market, right? So economic benefit is not the only benefit, while still very important, but it's not the only benefit that they compare the other offerings with. They also compare non-economic benefits or other functional and emotional benefits. So go back to the value elements. And there are functional elements such as saving time or reducing anxiety in terms of emotion that are also very important. Haven't we heard? I mean,
No, I don't know how to make no chicken Alfredo, and you're not making no.
Are you judging my cooking?
I'm hungry now.
You don't. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So in this case, you know, when we're talking about the non-economic, say, for example, saving time or reducing anxiety, we just went through a big renovation project at our place. And what we found out that we were willing to pay a little bit of extra money if they took care of buying certain materials that we had no idea what would be a good quality or what would be the specifications for, right? So for us, that economic benefit was valuable because of the anxiety that it took away from the process we're in. So in the bundle of relative advantage, they just don't look at the price as a bottom line. They also look at the complete bundle, okay? And then bring the non-economic or brand equity part of it, which is the intangibles, the prestige, the social status, you know, what does some brands represent in terms of just usage? So those are the intangible, non-economic, and economic benefits that consumers compare when they are trying to find a relative advantage to the new idea of service or product that they come across. Now, compatibility. What is compatibility? How does the new product or service align with our current values? Okay, think about the high efficiency laundry detergent that was launched into the market. Are you aware of the number of studies they did, and they found that no matter what the label suggested, people were still using the full cap because they just did not believe that half the cap is going to do just as good of a job of cleaning, right? Or the wine cork that we use, you know, there is the studies that show that there's at least 10% of wine spoilage because of the cork breaking or not aerating well, and that a metal screw cap can do the job much better in a much efficient way than a cork can do. But our perception of how it is tied up to a good quality wine suggests that the metal cap is just not as good quality as a corked bottle wine, right? The perceptions, the problem that electric cars faced when they hit the market. A big segment of consumers just was not ready. And even today, it questions how reliable it would be if they're going on long trips, or how easy it would be for them to recharge it. How accessible would those be, right? Those were the true inhibitions because of the compatibility issues, because of how we are so used to traveling. We know that we'll get gas stations. We know exactly how it works. We know exactly how much we have to spend. We know exactly where to take our cars when it breaks down. So those things have been compatible with our values. So if you're introducing a product like electric car, you're not just giving us a new technology, but you have to fight those obstacles. Remember the pain points from a theory of jobs to be done. What is it that you'll have to overcome in order for them to see the value? Only if I'm convinced that there would be a charging station available to me every 10 miles, would I even consider the technological advanced benefits or the attributes of a car, of an electrical car, right? So that's the compatibility. Which value or set belief of the current consumer segment are you fighting when we are introducing your brand into the market? Got it? Then comes the complexibility. Complexibility, as the term or the word suggests, is not just technical. You know, complexibility is also based on the consumer's skill set. How confident do the consumers feel about using your product or service? It's not just how easy it is. Now, if you go back to theory of planned behavior or theory of reasoned action, they say that there are the most significantly valuable variables that impact adoption is perceived ease of use and perceived usefulness. What is perceived ease of use, which is now in just giving new nomenclature to old theories, is performance, is how easy it is for me to use it. Not knowing anything about that technology, will I be able to just pick it up and use it. And this goes back to a washing machine, or the smartphones had the same issue when it entered into the market. The reason why Razor came back, right? The foldable Razor, it's a smartphone, but it still has the compatibility of actually the screen closing down, because a lot of people had that inhibition of, if the screen is open, they were sending unknown texts and so on and so forth. So that's the complexity of it. I don't want to get away with it, the big struggle that smartphone had. And if the service providers had not taken on the smartphones because of this lobbying and really killed every kind of dial-in phone that was available at that time, smartphone will still have a very hard time getting into the market, because if you think about it, everything that a smartphone has offered, people already had very well-established brands to accomplish all of it, right? The postal services were writing letters, the cameras were clicking amazing photos, the vinyl records or the iPods were giving you music, the television and newspaper gave you news. Everything was done by an established industry. And so the inhibition was really strong. It was the players of the smartphone market that really turned their arms or twisted the arms of the service providers as the only option that was available to the consumers to kind of compel us to go for it, right? So that's another angle of overcoming complexity that not many startups have. So you have to think about the angle of complexity of what it is that the consumers are going to look at your product and think about in terms of being complex, okay? Now, why is triability important? This is a concept that was introduced in 1935 and is still very relevant now, and more relevant now because of what we have as influencers and social opinion makers, right? Triability means how confident do people feel about using your product or viewing or having that exposure, limited time usability option, right? So remember the 2008 debacle and how a lot of automobile industry started giving trial cars. Even Volkswagen or all those other companies gave you the cars to take, not for a joyride, but to keep with you for a weekend and then decide whether you really wanted to buy that car or not. Triability offer, right? So now, because word of mouth has become so popular as a means of trust and review for consumers, that triability is again very, very important in terms of knowing. And when I say opinion leaders or influencers, don't just think about those teenagers on YouTube. It is very relevant in a B2B market setting as well, because you always have experts, people who the buyers know, have knowledge and in-depth, and their value matters. They're decision makers. In B2B context, we call them the decision maker tree. But triability matters in those sense, right? And then observability is, now this does not apply to all concepts, but observability means the reference group effect in terms of what do consumers see themselves as in terms of identifying or using that product. Is there an effect of using that product as a value system? So you remember the discount effect theory, when going green was the in thing. It's a norm now. It's not the most trendy thing, but when going green was very important, people had a Prius parked in their parkway, and they were using CFL light and running water because there was this discount effect. You have shown the world that your or solar panels on the rooftops, you have shown the world the observability part of it, gave you the discount effect of behaving the whatever way you would want to inside your house, because nobody was observing you there or nobody was judging you there. So that discount effect, when we tend to eat healthy, we tend to eat more, or we, okay, this is a healthy piece, but let's eat more. So those are the discount effect where observability matters. Does using your particular product have an impact on how others will perceive you and therefore change your own behavior? We just finished a research study, which was very important. What we studied was the spillover effect of wearable technology. If you're wearing something like a smartwatch or a Fitbit, or using an app and consciously using an app, like health apps are inbuilt in our smartphones. But if you're consciously using that app to see how many steps you have taken, how healthy your food intake was, it spills over into more healthy habits, right? Because of the feedback loop. So we did a study to see if it made people make more healthy choices. And we also included, more self-care. So making regular doctor's appointment, taking care of their health matrices, taking supplemental medicines, and doing more exercise or engaging in more healthy activities. And we did see a significant statistical impact of people using any kind of wearable technology. We focused on wristwatches in general, any kind of technology, because they then perceived that they have to carry a certain image, a certain persona, a self-identification image. And that spilled over into all these additional healthy habits that we're doing. We are just finishing the write-up of that article for publication. But it was really interesting, where the observability part played a very strong role in the overall impact of using that particular technology, right? So something that has been, proposed in 1935 is very, very, very relevant today. People do have an impact of these variables on the adoption rate of whether they would give you the time of the day to think about it, okay? Okay. Now I'm going to stop over here because the next part overlays the theory of diffusion with infatuation theory of marketing. But before I go there, I want to go back to the main project, and I will put you in, where is it? There we go. Okay, so this is something that has been available on the Canvas page since the beginning of the course, but I want all of you to take a break now from listening to me, and I'll put you all after the break. During the break, I'll put you all in your research in your group, and then I want you to look at the first two questions: your business idea and jobs to be done, and just think about it. Just brainstorm it, and that will be only for about 15 minutes or so, where I want you to know what it is that we are discussing and how do you think it would actually translate into the project that you're working on, okay? And the diffusion of innovation, just the first question. That after you have had an idea, just to understand what it is that we are discussing and how will it translate to what I'm asking you to think about in terms of building your brand, then we'll come back and finish the S-curve and the infatuation stage. That ways it will give you a break and you will get a perspective of what are we doing and why are we doing it. Okay? Okay, any questions?
So Professor, do we do this after our break? I mean, break is at 10:15.
Yeah, we'll take an early break. Okay, we'll take an early break for 15 minutes. And when we come back, I'll put you into breakout rooms, and then you will discuss this. And after you're done with that, we'll continue with our lecture. Okay?
Yep.
So it is.
Yeah, Professor. So we are answering the first question under diffusion of innovation and S-curves, right?
Up to the first question.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
up to. So go over the session, the first session, the second session, and then the first question under the diffusion of innovation. And then we'll get to this. Okay?
Okay.
So it is about 10:07 now. Let's just assume it's 10:10. We'll come back in 15 minutes, 10:25. If I'm not able to, I see my kids getting anxious already. So I'll come back and put you in your breakout rooms, and then we'll continue from there. Okay? All right. So see you back at 10:25. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
proposition.